Hello, my name is Joe Halfman, and I'm a Senior Solution Consultant with fourTENS. This video is part 2 on the Accordion menu component built for K2 Smartforms. In this how-to session, I'll explain the basic building blocks for creating a single-page user interface that uses the Accordion menu for navigating between web pages and K2 forms. Let's take a look at how we want to design the main form. On our form, there's a fixed header at the top, a fixed width menu on the left, and the remainder of the page is a content area, which is implemented as an iframe. One thing that is very important is that as the size of the browser changes, we want to make sure that the contents area width and height are adjusted so that the area scrolls correctly. So as you can see here, we're mimicking the resize of the browser. We want to make sure that our header stays the same, our menu stays the same, but that our scrollable content adjusts as need be. Now let's see this in action as a K2 form, and then we'll look at the basic building blocks for it. Here's the K2 form with the desired layout. The header is on top, and there's a menu on the left. For the purposes of this basic demo of the layout, some buttons have been placed on the left to show basic setting of the URL for the content area. Finally, the content area takes up the rest of the form. As we click the buttons over here, you'll see we update the content area and go to a different web page. Also, if I resize this page, you'll see that the content area automatically resizes and scrolls as needed, while the header stays fixed up at the top and our button area here maintains a fixed width. And again, as I pull this out, you'll see that my Accordion menu title stays nice on the right hand side. Everything stays fixed. Let's take a look at the form design. The only view that is on the form is the header view. As such, it will be fixed, and the width over here is set to 100%. There are also several data labels dropped onto the form that are used to inject HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that's required to create this single page layout. Remember to hide any data labels that contain CSS or JavaScript, and make sure to check the literal property, as we see on the right hand side here, as well as uncheck the prevent XCSS property. The buttons that are used in the demo to update the content area's URL are added directly to the form as well, and by default will be displayed on the far left of the form. Let's take a look at the setting of the contents of the data labels. If we go to our rules, we'll see that these are done in when the server loads the form rule. The first one we're going to set is the contents data label. This is going to be the definition for our iframe. So it's nothing more than an HTML iframe definition with a fixed position. If we take a closer look at this, we can see that we're setting some specific styles. The position is fixed. The top we know is going to be 59 pixels based on the height of our header. And the left is 200 pixels, again, based on the width of our menu. And then we don't have a border, and we set the height and width to 100% initially. We're using the menu data label to inject JavaScript that does the auto resizing of our content area. Once again, let's take a closer look at that script. So you'll see what we have is we have two functions, one that's going to calculate the content height and the other one that's going to calculate that content width. Both of those calculations are based on the window inner height and window inner width. And notice that we subtract, again, the height of the toolbar, or the, I should say the header up top, as well as the width for the menu on the left. And this all happens because we define a window resize function that calls those two functions. In addition, when we first load this script, we call the function so that we make sure that it's calculated correctly as the browser first loads. Now, the navigation that we do by clicking on the buttons and changing the content URL is accomplished in several ways here. So first, what we do is we've defined an expression, and this expression is going to set the content URL of our iframe. It's very simple JavaScript that you can see down here, where we're just getting the element by ID and setting the source by replacing the link placeholder in that particular script with our linked data label. And that all happens by a set content URL rule that does nothing more than calls that expression, and then we add a date timestamp so that we make sure that our script executes every time. And so then when we click on a button, all we do is we transfer to that linked data label the URL that we want for our content area, and then we call the execute set content URL rule in order to execute that script that will set our content. This concludes the session on the basic building blocks for the layout of the single page form. In the next session, I'll build on this basic layout and add the accordion menu and start taking a closer look at the CSS and JavaScript used in its implementation.